The slap echoed through the ER like a gunshot. The guard's head snapped sideways, his cheek already blooming red. His Glock, which had been pressed against Yimika's temple 3 seconds earlier, clattered to the sterile floor. "In this room," Yimika said, her voice calm as death, "I am God. And if you ever point that toy at me again, I will put shit in your eyes and make you watch your boss die." The guard's hand moved toward the gun. Yimika's foot was faster. She kicked it across the room, never breaking eye contact. "Sit down." He sat. Tadahiro Kinjo was dying. The monitor screamed, ventricular fibrillation. His heart wasn't stopped. It was quivering, unable to pump blood. The glass from the car crash had punctured his left lung and nicked the pericardium. He had maybe 90 seconds before his brain started dying from oxygen starvation. Yimika didn't waste time on panic. She grabbed the defibrillator paddles, checked the rhythm on the monitor, confirmed VFib, not asystole, which meant the shock could work, and charged them to 200 joules. Clear. She placed one paddle below his right clavicle, the other on his left side below the nipple, textbook hand placement to send the current straight through the heart. His body arced off the gurney, every muscle contracting at once. Nothing. The monitor still screamed. Charging to 300. Clear. This time, the monitor hiccuped. A single blip. Then another. Then a rhythm. Sinus tachycardia. Fast but alive. Tadahiro's eyes snapped open. The first thing he saw was her, a woman with fire in her eyes and blood on her scrubs, standing over him like she'd just ripped him back from the afterlife by sheer will. She had. "You're in normal sinus rhythm now," Yimika said, already moving to insert a chest tube for his collapsed lung. "Try not to die again in the next 10 minutes. I'm busy." From the observation deck above, Finley Harrington set down his champagne flute. He'd been passing through on his monthly charity inspection when the chaos started. Now, he couldn't look away. In 30 years, he'd never seen anyone who couldn't be controlled. The hunt had begun. But here is the question that has the entire kingdom whispering. Who is Yimika really? Because by the end of this story, you'll realize she wasn't just caught in the crossfire. She was the one who pulled the trigger. If you're new here, you're joining at the perfect time. We tell stories for the ones who love fierce heroines and dangerous men. Before we reveal the next insane plot, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. You do not want to be the only one who misses the mind-bending twist if it changes everything you think you know about Yimika. Are you Team Mafia or Team Duke? Lock in your vote in the comments right now. I'm reading every single one to see whose side you're on before the blood starts to spill. Smash that like button and drop a comment telling me, what's your current situation right now, and where in the world are you listening from? Are you at work secretly binge-watching, lying in bed when you should be sleeping, or maybe escaping reality on your commute? Where are my story lovers tuning in from today? I love knowing where you all are. Now, let's get back to the hospital wing, where a Duke's pride is about to meet a nurse's Pepper. She didn't ask his name, didn't ask what happened, didn't flinch when she saw the full-body tattoos that marked him as Yakuza, as someone who lived in shadows and violence. To her, he was just another body that needed fixing. Tadahiro tried to speak, but his throat was raw. He watched her work instead. Her hands moved with brutal efficiency. She located the 5th intercostal space, made the incision, and drove the chest tube between his ribs with the kind of controlled force that came from having done this 100 times. The collapsed lung began to reinflate. The monitor stabilized. "There," she said, taping the tube in place. "Now you can breathe like a normal human being." One of the other guards, there were 5 of them now, all armed, all watching, stepped forward. "Miss, we need to move the boss to a private. He has a pneumothorax, possible internal bleeding, and his heart just remembered how to beat 5 minutes ago." Yimika snapped. He's not going anywhere until I say so. You want him to die in a hallway? Be my guest. But it won't be on my watch. The guard looked at Tadahiro. Tadahiro's lips curved into the faintest smile. Do what she says, he rasped. From the observation deck above the ER, Finley Harrington set down his champagne flute. He'd been passing through on his monthly charity inspection, a PR stunt his grandfather insisted on to remind the public that the Harringtons cared about the commoners they served. Finley didn't care. He never did. The hospital was just another asset in the family portfolio, and these inspections were tedious obligations. But then the chaos had started. Armed men, a dying gangster, and her. Finley watched as Yimika barked orders at a resident twice her age, as she moved through the trauma bay like she owned it. She was an intern, according to the badge clipped to her scrub pocket. 27 years old. Nigerian descent. Top of her class at Johns Hopkins before transferring here. He'd read her file once, months ago, when his grandfather had praised her work ethic. Finley had dismissed it. Another overachiever, trying to prove herself. But now, watching her stand toe-to-toe with armed criminals, watching her command a room full of people who should have been her superiors, Finley felt something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. By the time Yimika finished stabilizing Tadahiro and handed him off to the surgical team, the entire ER was buzzing. Nurses whispered. Residents stared. Even the attending physician, Dr. Manuel Chun, pulled her aside. Johnson, he said quietly, that was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Yimika wiped the blood off her hands with a paper towel. He was dying. I saved him. That's the job. You slapped a man holding a gun. He was in my way. Dr. Chun studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. You've got steel nerves, kid. Just try not to get yourself killed, all right? Yimika nodded and walked away. She didn't even see the way people looked at her now, with a mix of awe and fear. She didn't see Finley Harrington still watching from above, his fingers drumming against the glass. And she didn't see Tadahiro Kinjo, now sedated and prepped for surgery, smile in his sleep. The legend of the nurse had begun. 3 days later, Yimika was hiding in the hospital garden. It wasn't really hiding. She was on her lunch break, eating a sad turkey sandwich on a bench beneath a cherry blossom tree. But it felt like hiding. Ever since the incident with the Korean gangster, she'd become a minor celebrity. People stopped her in hallways. Nurses asked for selfies. One of the surgical residents had even asked for her autograph. It was exhausting. She just wanted to eat her sandwich in peace. You didn't bow. Yimika looked up. A man stood before her, tall and impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. His hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass. He looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement. Finley Harrington. She'd seen his face on plaques all over the hospital. Heir to the Harrington Empire. Future Duke of the Eastern Counties. A man who, according to hospital gossip, had never heard the word no in his entire life. Excuse me? Yimika said. 3 days ago, Finley said, his voice cold and precise, I passed through the main lobby. Everyone stopped. Everyone bowed. Except you. You walked right past me like I was invisible. Yimika took another bite of her sandwich. I didn't see you. You looked directly at me. Then I didn't care. Finley's jaw tightened. Around them, the garden had gone silent. A few nurses who'd been chatting on a nearby bench were now staring, wide-eyed. Do you know who I am? Finley asked. Yep, Yimika said. You're the guy whose name is on the building. Congratulations. Your grandfather has money. Someone gasped. Finley took a step closer. I could have you fired, he said quietly. One word from me, and you'll never work in medicine again. Not in this country. Not anywhere. Yimika stood up. She was a full head shorter than him, but somehow she made him feel small. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Cologne Duke," she said, her voice steady and sharp. "I don't care about who you are, and you can do your worst. I don't bow to people who think respect is something you can buy or threaten out of someone. You want my respect? Earn it. Until then, you're just another pompous, arrogant man, wasting my lunch break." She stepped around him. "Now leave my presence before I pour pepper on you." Finley stood frozen as Yimika walked away. Around the garden, nurses and staff members stared at him, waiting to see what he'd do. He'd been called many things in his life: brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. But no one had ever called him pompous to his face. No one had ever dismissed him like he was a nuisance. And Pepper? Why did she say Pepper? Wasn't he hot enough? Did she want to blind him? Most likely. His hands clenched into fists. He should fire her. He should destroy her career. He should make an example of her, so that no one else ever dared to speak to him that way again. But as he watched her disappear through the garden doors, he felt that same curious pull he'd felt 3 days ago in the observation deck. She wasn't afraid of him. And Finley Harrington had spent his entire life surrounded by people who were terrified of disappointing him. Finley was still standing in the garden, contemplating his next move, when someone brushed past him. "Sorry," the man muttered. Finley turned. It was him, the Korean gangster from the ER, Tadahiro Kinjo. He was dressed casually now, in jeans and a black t-shirt that showed the edges of his tattoos. His chest was bandaged, but he moved like someone who'd been stabbed before and knew how to work through the pain. "Watch where you're going," Finley snapped. Tadahiro stopped, turned, looked at him. "I said I was sorry," Tadahiro said evenly. "I don't care what you said. You." Finley shoved him. Not hard, but enough to make a point. Enough to reassert dominance. Tadahiro smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Okay," Tadahiro said softly. Then he walked away. 2 hours later, Finley stood in the hospital parking garage, staring at what was left of his car collection. All 3 of them, the Aston Martin, the Bentley, the custom Rolls-Royce, had been destroyed. Tires slashed. Windows shattered. The word "pompous" spray-painted across the Aston Martin's hood in red letters 3 feet tall. Security footage showed nothing. The cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned. Finley's hands shook, not with fear, but with rage. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Grandfather," he said, "I want to know everything about a man named Tadahiro Kinjo. And I want it now." The horse track at Harrington Estate stretched across 50 acres of manicured green, a monument to old money and older traditions. Finley came here when he needed to think, when the weight of expectations pressed too hard against his chest. The rhythmic thunder of hooves, the smell of leather and sweat, it cleared his mind. Today his mind was anything but clear. He'd spent the last 12 hours digging into Tadahiro Kinjo's background, and what he'd found had turned his blood cold. The man wasn't just a gangster. He was the heir to the Kinjo clan, one of the most feared Yakuza organizations in East Asia. Tadahiro had been raised in the mountains of rural Korea, trained by his grandfather in combat, survival, and something the reports called the old ways. He'd killed his first man at 16. By 20, he'd consolidated power over 3 rival factions. And now he was here, in Finley's territory, destroying his property and walking around like he owned the place. Finley tightened the reins on his stallion, Sovereign, a black thoroughbred worth more than most people's houses. He urged the horse into a gallop, trying to outrun the rage that threatened to consume him. He rounded the far bend of the track and nearly collided with another rider. Tadahiro Kinjo sat astride a chestnut mare, his posture relaxed, his face unreadable. He wore riding boots and dark jeans, his bandaged chest visible beneath an open jacket. He looked like he'd been riding his entire life. "You," Finley said, pulling Sovereign to a halt. "Me," Tadahiro agreed. "This is private property. I was invited." Tadahiro gestured toward the estate manager's office in the distance. "Your grandfather's assistant gave me a guest pass. Something about community outreach and cultural exchange." Finley's jaw clenched. His grandfather had been on a philanthropy kick lately, trying to soften the Harrington family's reputation. Apparently, that now included inviting criminals to their private facilities. "You destroyed my cars," Finley said. "Did I?" Tadahiro's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" "I know it was you." "Then call the police." Tadahiro smiled. "Oh wait, you can't. Because you have no evidence. And because men like us don't call the police, do we, Duke?" Finley's hands tightened on the reins. Sovereign sensed his tension and pawed at the ground, nostrils flaring. "What do you want?" Finley asked. "Nothing from you," Tadahiro said. "I'm just here enjoying your family's hospitality. Beautiful facility. The horses are well trained. The grounds are immaculate." He paused. "Though I have to say, the owner could use some lessons in manners. Get off my property. Make me—" For a long moment, they stared at each other across 10 feet of dirt track. The air between them crackled with violence barely restrained. Finley had trained in fencing, in boxing, in every gentleman's sport his family deemed appropriate. But looking at Tadahiro, he knew with absolute certainty that if they fought here, now, one of them would die. And it might not be the gangster. "This isn't over," Finley said. "I certainly hope not," Tadahiro replied. Then he urged his horse forward, brushing past Finley close enough that their stirrups nearly touched. Finley watched him ride away, his entire body vibrating with fury. He pulled out his phone and made another call. "Yes, Mr. Harrington," his assistant answered. "Find out everything there is to know about Yimika Johnson," Finley said. "Her family, her friends, her debts, her fears. I want to know what makes her tick." "Sir." "Just do it." Because if Tadahiro Kinjo was here, it wasn't for the horses or the hospitality. It was for her. And Finley Harrington did not share. It started at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Yimika was finishing a double shift, her feet aching, her eyes burning from lack of sleep. She just closed the chart on a 12-year-old with appendicitis when the alarms started screaming. "Code Silver. Active threat in the building." The ER exploded into controlled chaos. Security guards rushed toward the main entrance. Nurses began moving patients into lockdown rooms. Dr. Chen grabbed Yimika's arm. "Get to the supply closet and stay there," he ordered. "What's happening?" "Armed men in the lobby. They're asking for the patient in room 304. Room 304. Tadahiro Kinjo. Yimika's blood went cold. He'd been moved out of the ICU 2 days ago, healing faster than anyone expected. He'd refused police protection, refused to give a statement about the car accident. His guards had been stationed outside his door 24/7, a small army in expensive suits. But now someone else had come for him. Yimika didn't go to the supply closet. She ran toward room 304. The hallway was empty except for 2 bodies on the floor. Tadahiro's guards, unconscious but breathing. The door to his room hung open, bullet holes stitching across its surface. Inside, Tadahiro stood beside his bed, hospital gown hanging loose, and 4-pole in his hands like a weapon. 3 men in black tactical gear surrounded him, guns drawn. "Come quietly, Kinjo," one of them said in Korean. "The chairman wants to talk." "The chairman can go to hell," Tadahiro replied in the same language. The man nodded to his companions. They moved forward. Yimika grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall and stepped into the room. "Hey," she said. All four men turned to look at her. "You can't be here," she continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "This is a hospital. We have protocols. If you want to move a patient, you need to fill out the proper discharge paperwork, sign the liability waivers, and get approval from the attending physician. Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." One of the tactical gear men laughed. "Little girl, walk away before you get hurt." Yimika pulled the pin on the fire extinguisher and sprayed him directly in the face. The room exploded into chaos. The man screamed, clawing at his eyes. His companions raised their guns. Tadahiro moved like lightning, driving the four-pole into one man's throat and sweeping the legs out from under another. Yimika didn't wait to see what happened next. She grabbed Tadahiro's arm. "Come on." They ran. Behind them, gunshots echoed through the hallway. Yimika's mind raced. The security team would be here soon, but not soon enough. She needed to hide him somewhere safe, somewhere these men wouldn't think to look. She dragged Tadahiro toward the service elevator, the one that only staff used, the one that went to places patients never saw. "Where are we going?" Tadahiro asked, his breathing labored. His stitches had torn. Blood seeped through his hospital gown. "Somewhere they won't find you," Yimika said. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. Yimika hit the button for the basement level. "The morgue?" Tadahiro asked, reading the button labels. "You have a better idea." He laughed. It was a rough, pain sound. "You know, most people would have let them take me. Most people are idiots." The elevator descended into darkness. Above them, they could hear shouts, running footsteps, the wail of police sirens finally arriving. When the doors opened, Yimika led Tadahiro through the cold white corridors of the morgue, past the examination tables and the wall of refrigerated drawers. She pulled open an empty drawer, one of the larger ones, meant for bodies over 6 feet tall. "Get in," she said. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" Tadahiro studied her face for a moment, then climbed into the drawer. It was a tight fit, and he had to curl onto his side. But he managed. "If I die in here," he said, "I'm going to haunt you. If you die in here, I'll revive you just so I can kill you myself for wasting my time." She slid the drawer closed, leaving just a crack for air. Then she sat down on the floor, her back against the wall of drawers, and waited. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. She'd just assaulted 3 armed men with a fire extinguisher and hidden a Yakuza boss in a morgue drawer. This was either the bravest or the stupidest thing she'd ever done. She was starting to think it might be both. The Harrington Estates Grand Ballroom hadn't seen this many people since the last coronation gala. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Men in tailored suits and women in evening gowns mingled beneath oil paintings of Harrington ancestors who stared down with expressions of perpetual disapproval. Yimika stood near the refreshment table, feeling wildly out of place in her borrowed dress, a simple black number that Dr. Chen's wife had lent her when the invitation arrived. She tried to decline. Hospital interns didn't get invited to estate galas. But the invitation had been specific, addressed to her by name, signed by Lord Harrington himself. "You saved a man's life under extraordinary circumstances," the card had read. "Your presence would honor us." So here she was, eating tiny sandwiches and wondering how quickly she could leave without causing an international incident. "You came," a voice said behind her. She turned. Tadahiro stood there in a black suit that fit him like it had been painted on. His chest was still bandaged beneath the crisp white shirt, but you couldn't tell unless you knew what to look for. He looked dangerous and elegant in equal measure. They invited me, Yimika said. It would have been rude not to show up. They invited you because my family made a very generous donation to the hospital, with the stipulation that you be honored for your service. Tadahiro's lips curved into a slight smile. I may have suggested it. You didn't have to do that. You hid me in a morgue drawer. It seemed like the least I could do. Before Yimika could respond, a man's voice boomed across the ballroom. Lord Edmund Harrington, Finley's grandfather, stood on the raised platform at the far end of the room. He was 83 years old, built like an oak tree, with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, thank you for joining us this evening. As you know, the Harrington family has a long tradition of service to this county. And today, I'm pleased to announce the continuation of one of our most cherished traditions. The room went silent. Even the waiters stopped moving. The decathlon of sovereigns will commence in 2 weeks, Lord Harrington continued. For those unfamiliar with our custom, this is a 10-day competition testing strength, skill, intelligence, and character. The winner will serve as the honorary Duke of the Eastern Counties for 30 days, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Yimika had heard about the decathlon in passing, some kind of rich people's game, but she'd never paid much attention to it. This year, Lord Harrington said, his voice rising, we're expanding the competition. 20 participants instead of 12. 18 invitations will go to families of distinguished lineage. But 2 slots, 2 wildcard positions, will be awarded through public lottery. Any citizen may apply. The murmurs turned into excited chatter. Lord Harrington raised his hand for silence. The winner will not only receive the title, but will also have the authority to propose one change to county law or policy. This is not symbolic. The Harrington family will use all our influence to see that change enacted. Now people were really talking. Yimika watched as various guests pulled out their phones, no doubt already strategizing how to secure those wild card slots. My grandson, Finley Harrington, has won this competition for 2 consecutive years, Lord Harrington continued, gesturing to where Finley stood near the front of the room, looking every inch the undefeated champion. We'll see if anyone can break his winning streak. Finley's eyes swept across the crowd. They found Yimika and held. She looked away first. The application period opens tonight, Lord Harrington concluded. May the best sovereign win. The crowd erupted into applause. Music started playing. People began moving toward the networking opportunities this presented. Yimika felt someone step close beside her. She didn't need to look to know it was Finley. His cologne. You should apply, he said, for the wild card position. I'm not interested in playing games with rich people, Yimika replied. It's not a game. The winner gets real power. You could change hospital funding policies, increase nurse salaries, reform healthcare access. He paused. Isn't that what you went into medicine for? To help people? She turned to face him. What's your angle? No angle. I just think it would be interesting to see what someone like you could do with that kind of authority. Someone like me? Someone who isn't afraid to slap armed men and talk back to dukes. Before Yimika could respond, Tadahiro appeared at her other side. She's not interested, he said flatly. Finley's expression hardened. I don't recall asking you. And I don't recall caring what you think. The 2 men stared at each other across Yimika like she was the last piece of land in a territory war. The air between them crackled with barely contained violence. Gentlemen, Yimika said, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel, I'm standing right here, and neither of you gets to speak for me. She grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and walked away. Behind her, she heard Tadahiro speak quietly to Finley. I'm entering the competition. On what grounds? Finley replied, "You're not part of any distinguished lineage. Not in this country. Wild card lottery. My application goes in tonight. You'll never win it. The odds are 2 in 10,000. Watch me." Yimika didn't hear Finley's response, but something in the quality of the silence that followed told her that everything had just changed. The game had begun, and somehow she was the prize. The morning of the first trial dawned cold and gray. Yimika stood in the medical tent at the edge of Harrington Estates Northfield, organizing supplies and wondering how her life had gotten so complicated in the span of 2 weeks. Tadahiro had won his lottery slot against 10,000 applicants through what had to be either divine intervention or extremely sophisticated rigging. His name had been drawn. The other wild card position had gone to a farmer from the outer counties, a man named Thomas Webb, who looked terrified to be there. 20 competitors total. 18 from old money families with names like Ashford and Rothschild and Vanderberg. 1 farmer, 1 Yakuza boss, and Yimika, who'd been hired as the primary field medic after Dr. Chun recommended her for the position. She tried to refuse, but the pay was 3 times her usual rate, and she had student loans that were slowly crushing her into dust. So here she was, nervous. She looked up. Dr. Chun stood in the tent entrance, medical bag in hand. "Should I be?" Yimika asked. "These people take this competition very seriously. Last year, someone broke both legs in the fencing trial. The year before that, a woman nearly drowned in the swimming challenge." He paused. "Just be ready for anything." The horn sounded. The first trial was beginning. Yimika and Dr. Chun moved to the edge of the field, where Lord Harrington stood on a raised platform, addressing the gathered crowd of spectators. Hundreds of people had shown up, treating this like a sporting event. Vendors sold food. Children waved banners. "The first trial is simple," Lord Harrington announced. "A pursuit across 5 miles of terrain. Competitors will ride on horseback from here to the eastern checkpoint, navigating forest trails and open fields. First 10 to arrive move on to the afternoon trial. Last 10 are eliminated." Yimika's stomach dropped. Eliminated on day 1? However, Lord Harrington continued, "There are red flags hidden along the route. Bring back a flag, and you're automatically safe, regardless of your finishing position. There are only 5 flags." The competitors mounted their horses. Yimika recognized most of them from the gala, sons and daughters of industrial empires, heirs to banking fortunes. They all looked confident, comfortable in their saddles. Finley rode Sovereign, the massive black stallion. He sat straight-backed and composed, every inch the 2-time champion. Tadahiro rode the same chestnut mare from the track, but something was different about him now. His posture had shifted. He looked feral, dangerous, like someone who'd learned to ride bareback through mountain passes while being hunted. The starting pistol fired. 20 horses exploded forward in a thunder of hooves. The crowd roared. What happened next would become legend. Finley took an early lead, Sovereign's long stride eating up the ground. Behind him, the pack jostled for position, following the clearly marked trail into the forest. Tadahiro veered off the trail immediately. Yimika watched through binoculars as he guided his horse straight into the thick underbrush, disappearing into terrain that looked impassable on horseback. The crowd murmured in confusion. "What's he doing?" someone asked. "He's going to kill himself," someone else replied. But 8 minutes later, Tadahiro emerged from the forest at a completely different point, a red flag tied to his saddle, mud splattered across his face and chest. He'd cut straight through the terrain. Everyone else was avoiding, using what looked like animal trails and creek beds. The crowd went silent with shock. Then the cheering started. Finley crossed the finish line first, as expected. But his face was dark with fury, because Tadahiro had already been there waiting, lounging against a fence post with that infuriating smile. "Good ride, Duke," Tadahiro said. "You've got excellent form." "You cheated," Finley said. "I took a shortcut. That's not against the rules. That terrain is impossible on horseback. For you, maybe." Lord Harrington stepped forward before things could escalate. Tadahiro Kinjo wins the first trial through flag acquisition. Finley Harrington places second through speed. Congratulations to both. As the other competitors began arriving, Yimika saw Finley staring at Tadahiro with something beyond simple rivalry. It was the look of someone who just realized he was in a real fight for the first time in his life. And he wasn't sure he could win. If you have been enjoying this story so far, kindly subscribe and hit the notification bell to ensure you're part of the inner circle for every new release. The screen might go black, but the legend continues. Don't miss the next epic story. Tadahiro limped into the medical tent an hour after the trial ended, mud caked in his hair, blood seeping through his shirt where his barely healed chest wounds had torn open. "You're an idiot," Yimika said, not looking up from the inventory sheet she was updating. "Nice to see you too. Sit." He sat on the examination table, wincing as he peeled off his shirt. The ride had been brutal on his healing body. Fresh blood, mixed with old bandages, and Yimika could see where the stitches had pulled loose. She snapped on gloves and began cleaning the wounds with methodical precision. Tadahiro didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched her work with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You reopened 3 of the sutures," Yimika said, "and you've got severe saddle sores that are going to make tomorrow's trial absolute hell. What were you thinking taking that route?" "I was thinking I needed to win." "Why?" She looked up at him. "Why does this matter so much to you? You're not from here. You don't care about being Duke of anywhere. So why are you risking your life for some rich family's game?" Tadahiro was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for his discarded shirt and pulled something from the pocket. A small photograph, creased and faded. He handed it to her. The photo showed a young boy, maybe 6 years old, standing between 2 adults in what looked like a traditional Korean home. The boy was smiling. The adults weren't. "My younger brother," Tadahiro said, quietly. "Kenji. He died when I was 15. Yimika's hands stilled. "I'm sorry. He was sick. Leukemia. We were living in the mountains then, training with my grandfather. Remote area. No hospitals nearby." Tadahiro's jaw tightened. "By the time we got him to the city, it was too late. The doctor said if we'd caught it earlier, if we'd had access to proper care, he might have lived." He pointed to his chest, to the elaborate tattoo that covered his left side. Yimika had noticed it before, a cherry blossom tree with roots that extended down to his ribs. But now she saw what she'd missed. Hidden among the branches were dates. Birth and death dates. "I don't just have one," Tadahiro said. "I have 7. 7 people I loved who died because we couldn't get them help in time. My brother, my mother, my grandfather, others." He looked at her. "That's why I'm here. The winner gets to propose a policy change. I want to establish mobile medical units in rural areas. Real units with real equipment and trained staff. So that no one else has to watch someone they love die because a hospital was too far away." Yimika set down the antiseptic wipe. Her throat felt tight. "Each tattoo is someone you lost. Each one is a promise that I'll do better. That I'll build something that matters." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ironic, isn't it? I run a criminal empire. I've done terrible things. But the one thing I want most is to save lives." "That's not ironic," Yimika said. "That's redemption." She finished cleaning his wounds and began applying fresh bandages. Her hands moved gently now, with a reverence she hadn't felt before. These weren't just scars. They were a map of grief, a catalog of everyone he'd failed to save. "The saddle sores," she said finally. "I can prescribe something for the pain. And there's a special padding you can use tomorrow. It'll help." "Thank you." "But, Tadahiro," she met his eyes, "if you keep pushing yourself like this, you're not going to make it through 10 days. Your body needs rest." "I'll rest when it's over." "You'll be dead when it's over if you're not careful." He reached out and caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. "Then I guess you'll just have to keep putting me back together." For a moment, they stayed like that, her wrist in his hand, the space between them charged with something neither of them wanted to name. The tent flap opened. Finley stepped inside, still in his riding clothes, immaculate despite the race. "Am I interrupting?" he asked, his voice cold. Tadahiro released Yimika's wrist and slid off the examination table. "Not at all. I was just leaving." He walked past Finley without another word. The tent suddenly felt smaller, with just the two of them inside. "You shouldn't get close to him," Finley said. "Excuse me?" "Tadahiro Kinjo. He's dangerous. He's not the romantic figure you think he is." Yimika crossed her arms. "And what makes you think I'm getting close to him? I saw the way you looked at him, just now. You don't know anything about how I look at anyone." Finley stepped closer. "I know he's using you. This whole competition, he's only here because of you. He's trying to win so he can impress you, to make you think he's noble. But he's not. He's a criminal." "And what are you?" Yimika asked. "You're so convinced you're better than him. But from where I'm standing, you're both just men who think the world owes them something." Finley's expression shifted. For just a moment, the arrogant mask slipped, and she saw something raw underneath. Hurt maybe. Or loneliness. "You're wrong about me," he said quietly. Then he turned and left. Yimika stood alone in the medical tent, surrounded by bandages and antiseptic, and wondered when her life had become a drama she couldn't escape. Day 3 dawned with mist rolling across the archery field like something out of a medieval painting. 12 competitors remained. 8 had been eliminated in yesterday's swimming trial, a brutal endurance test that had left 2 people hospitalized, and 1 nobleman's son threatening to sue. Yimika had worked through the night, treating hypothermia and near drownings. She was exhausted. But the competition didn't stop for things like human limitations. The archery trial was simple in concept, complex in execution. Each competitor would shoot at targets placed at increasing distances: 50 yards, 75 yards, 100 yards. Score accumulated across all 3 distances. Highest score won immunity for the next trial. Finley was a natural archer. Yimika had learned this from Dr. Chen, who seemed to know everything about the Harrington family. Finley had trained since childhood, had won regional championships, had a collection of custom bows that cost more than most cars. Tadahiro, as far as anyone knew, had never touched a bow in his life. The competitors drew lots for shooting order. Finley drew first position. Tadahiro drew last. Finley stepped up to the line, with a recurve bow that looked like a work of art, carbon fiber and precision engineering wrapped in sleek black design. He knocked his first arrow, drew, and released in one fluid motion. Bullseye. The crowd applauded. His second shot, bullseye. His third, just off center, but still in the high-scoring ring. He moved to the 75-yard mark. 3 more shots. 2 bullseyes, and 1 outer ring. By the time he finished the 100-yard sequence, his total score was 267 out of 300 possible points. The crowd roared. It would be nearly impossible to beat. The other competitors took their turns. Most scored in the 180 to 220 range. Respectable, but nowhere near Finley's performance. Then Tadahiro stepped up to the line. He was given a standard competition bow. Nothing fancy, just functional equipment. He tested the draw weight, adjusted the sight, and stared down range at the target 50 yards away. His first shot went wide, not even close to the target. The crowd murmured. Some people laughed. Finley, standing in the competitor's area, smiled. Tadahiro's second shot hit the outer ring. His third shot hit just inside that. He moved to the 75-yard mark. The same pattern, adjustment, correction, improvement. His shots were getting progressively better, like he was teaching himself the physics of archery in real time. By the 100-yard mark, something had changed in his stance. He'd stopped trying to shoot like the textbook said. Instead, he'd adapted the bow to his own style, holding it at an angle that looked wrong, but somehow worked for him. His first 100-yard shot hit the second ring. His second hit the first ring. His third, his final shot of the competition, sailed through the morning mist and struck dead center. Bullseye. The crowd went silent with shock. Then the cheering started, louder than it had been, for Finley. Tadahiro's final score, 243. Not enough to win, but enough to place second. High enough to guarantee his advancement. But more importantly, and everyone watching understood this, he'd just demonstrated something more impressive than perfect accuracy. He'd shown the ability to learn and adapt under pressure. To take a skill he didn't have and forge it into competence through sheer focus and determination. Finley won the trial, but Tadahiro won the crowd. Yimika watched from the medical tent as Finley accepted his immunity award from Lord Harrington. His face was composed, professional, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. He'd won. So why did he look like he'd lost? After the ceremony, as competitors dispersed and the crowd began to leave, Yimika found herself packing supplies when Tadahiro appeared at the tent entrance. That was impressive, she said. The archery. It was adequate. He rolled his shoulder, wincing. My form was terrible, but I'm still here. Is that all that matters? Still being here. In my world, yes. Survival is everything. Yimika zipped up the medical bag and looked at him. What happens when you win? If you win, I establish the medical units. I save lives. He paused. And maybe I prove that someone like me can be more than what they were born to be. You already proved that, Yimika said, the moment you decided to try. Something shifted in Tadahiro's expression. He stepped closer. Yimika, Mr. Kinjo. Finley's voice cut through the moment, like a blade. He stood outside the tent, still in his competition clothes. Congratulations on your performance. Quite the improvement from your first shot. Thank you, Duke. Your shooting was flawless. Years of practice. Finley's eyes moved to Yimika. Miss Johnson, my grandfather would like to speak with you. Something about tomorrow's medical preparations. It was obviously a lie, but it was also obviously a dismissal. Tadahiro smiled. I'll see you tomorrow, Yimika. He left. Finley stepped into the tent. You can't keep doing this, Yimika said. Doing what? Interrupting. Interfering. Treating me like I'm some prize you two are competing for. Finley was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You're not a prize. He stopped. Started again. Tomorrow night, after the trial, there's something I want to show you. I'm not interested in. Please. The word sounded foreign coming from him, like he'd never used it before, and wasn't sure if he was pronouncing it correctly. Yimika sighed. 1 hour. That's all you get. That's all I need. He turned to leave, then paused at the tent entrance. For what it's worth, he said, not looking back, I'm not trying to win you. I'm trying to deserve you. There's a difference. Then he was gone, leaving Yumika alone with the uncomfortable realization that this competition was going to break all three of their hearts before it was over. Yumika found Finley in the East Garden at midnight, exactly where his cryptic note had said to meet him. She'd worked a brutal 12-hour shift treating everything from heat exhaustion to a dislocated shoulder, and the last thing she wanted was to play whatever game this was. But something in his voice earlier had sounded different, vulnerable, and despite everything, she was curious. The garden was lit by paper lanterns strung between iron trellises. Rose bushes lined the paths, their fragrance heavy in the summer air. At the center was a fountain, water cascading over marble tiers carved with Harrington family crests. Finley sat on the fountain's edge, still dressed in his competition clothes but with his jacket discarded, his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired. Human, for once. "You came," he said, standing as she approached. "I said I would. 1 hour." "Right." He seemed nervous, which was so unlike him that Yumika felt her defenses soften slightly. "Thank you." He gestured to a stone bench nearby. Spread across it were architectural blueprints, weighted down against the evening breeze with smooth river stones. "What is this?" Yumika asked. "A hospital." Finley stepped closer to the blueprints, his fingers tracing the lines. "Not just any hospital. A research and treatment center focused on underserved communities. Free clinics on every floor. Teaching facilities for nursing students. State-of-the-art emergency rooms designed with input from actual ER staff, not just administrators." Yumika moved closer, studying the designs. They were beautiful, functional, and thoughtful in ways most hospital architecture wasn't. The ER had 3 separate trauma bays. The pediatric wing had windows in every room. There was even a rooftop garden for patient recovery. "When did you design this?" she asked. "I didn't. Not alone." Finley pulled out another sheet, this one covered in notes, some in his precise handwriting, others in different hands. "I've been working with a team of architects and medical consultants for 3 years. Ever since," he stopped, started again. "My mother died in a hospital. Cancer. The treatment was excellent. The doctors were skilled, but the facility itself was cold. Sterile. She spent her last months in a room that felt like a prison cell." Yumika looked at him, seeing him differently now. "I'm sorry. She made me promise something before she died." She said, "Finley, you're going to have power someday. Real power. Use it to make sure no one else feels as helpless as we do right now." His jaw tightened. "I've been working on this project ever since. But my grandfather won't approve the funding. He says it's not economically viable, that hospitals need to turn a profit. So if you win the decathlon—" "When I win," Finley corrected, his arrogance returning for just a moment, "I'll use my 30 days of authority to approve the project myself. My grandfather will honor the tradition. The hospital gets built." Yumika studied the blueprints again. This wasn't some vanity project. This was years of careful planning, of genuine care for details that only someone who'd spent time in hospitals would notice. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked. Finley turned to face her fully. "Because you think I'm just an arrogant duke playing games. And maybe I am most of the time. But this," he gestured to the blueprints, "this is the one thing I care about more than my pride. And I wanted you to know that I'm not doing this for glory. I'm doing it because my mother asked me to, and because I've watched good people die in bad systems." The vulnerability in his voice was startling. This was a man who'd spent his entire life maintaining perfect control, and here he was cracking open his armor to show her the wound underneath. "It's a good plan," Yumika said quietly. "It would help a lot of people. But you still think Tadahiro's plan is better." She wanted to lie, but she'd never been good at lying. "I think both plans would save lives." his mobile units, your hospital. The world needs both. The world doesn't get both. Only one of us wins. Then maybe the world is broken, Yimika said. Maybe we shouldn't have to choose between two good things. Finley laughed, but it was a hollow sound. You're right, but that doesn't change reality. He began rolling up the blueprints. I need to win this, Yimika. Not because of you, though God knows that's become part of it, but because I made a promise to someone I loved, and I don't break promises. Neither does Tadahiro. Yimika said. His tattoos. Each one is a promise to someone he lost. I know. I had him investigated, remember? Finley secured the blueprints with a leather strap. That's what makes this so impossible. If he were actually a monster, this would be easy. But he's not. He's just a man trying to honor his dead. Same as me. He looked at her, and in the lantern light, she could see exhaustion written across his features. I don't know how to compete with that. I don't know how to fight someone whose cause is just as righteous as mine. Maybe you shouldn't fight at all. That's not how this works. Then maybe you need to change how it works. Finley smiled sadly. You really believe the world can be that simple? No, Yimika admitted. But I believe we should try anyway. They stood there in the midnight garden, two people on opposite sides of a conflict neither of them had chosen. And for just a moment, the competition fell away. There was just the sound of water and the smell of roses and the painful recognition that sometimes good people have to hurt each other to do good things. Your hour is up, Finley said finally. Yimika nodded. She turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth, your mother would be proud of you. She didn't wait to see his reaction. But as she walked back toward the medical tent, she heard him whisper something to the empty garden. I hope so. Day 5 began with thunder. Not the weather kind, though dark clouds gathered on the horizon, but the political kind. The kind that came when rich men realized the rules they'd written might not protect them anymore. Yimika was restocking the medical tent when she heard the shouting from the main pavilion. She grabbed her bag and ran, expecting injuries. Instead, she found chaos of a different sort. 10 competitors now remained. They stood in a semicircle around Lord Harrington, who sat in his ceremonial chair, looking every one of his 83 years. Beside him stood 3 members of the competition council, wealthy men who oversaw the rules and traditions of the decathlon. And in the center of the chaos stood Tadahiro, expressionless, while a man in an expensive suit pointed at him like he was a criminal on trial. Clear violation of the eligibility requirements. The man was saying his name was Richard Ashford, and his son was one of the remaining competitors. Section 3, Paragraph 7 of the Decathlon Charter states that all participants must be of good moral character. This man runs a criminal organization. I entered through the wild card lottery, Tadahiro said calmly. The lottery has no character requirements. Only the noble family slots do. That's a technicality. That's the rule. Lord Harrington raised his hand for silence. The crowd that had gathered, competitors, staff, spectators, went quiet. Mr. Ashford raises a valid concern, the old man said. Though the wild card system has no character clause, we must consider the spirit of the competition. Mr. Kinjo, you stand accused of running an illegal organization. Do you deny this? No, Tadahiro said simply. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Finley, standing to one side, looked surprised. Most people would have lied, or deflected, or hired lawyers. Tadahiro just admitted it. Then, by your own admission, Ashford began. I run what you call a criminal organization, Tadahiro interrupted. In Korea, we call it a family. We provide protection to people who can't get it from the government. We offer loans to businesses banks won't touch. We create order in places where the law refuses to go. He paused. Yes, we operate outside your legal system. But that doesn't mean we're without honor. Honor? Ashford scoffed. You're a thug with delusions of. Enough. Lord Harrington's voice cracked like a whip. Mr. Ashford, you will show respect in these proceedings, or you will be removed. Ashford's mouth snapped shut. Lord Harrington turned to Tadahiro. You've admitted to criminal activity. Why should we allow you to continue? Because the rules say you have to, Tadahiro replied. And because half the men in this competition have broken more laws than I have. They've just done it with lawyers and offshore accounts. Someone in the crowd laughed nervously. Lord Harrington's expression didn't change, but Yimika thought she saw the ghost of a smile. You're technically correct, the old man said. But perhaps... Wait. Everyone turned. Yimika was pushing through the crowd, her medical bag still clutched in one hand. Miss Johnson, Lord Harrington said, this is a council proceeding. Unless someone requires medical attention. They require a reality check, Yimika said. She stopped beside Tadahiro. Her heart was pounding, but her voice was steady. You want to talk about moral character? Fine. Let's talk about it. Yimika, Tadahiro said quietly, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned to face the council members. I'm a nurse. I've worked in 3 different hospitals across 2 countries. And you know what I've learned? The system is broken. Patients die because they can't afford treatment. Families go bankrupt because someone got cancer. Rural communities have zero access to emergency care because it's not profitable to serve them. This has nothing to do with. Ashford tried. It has everything to do with it. Yimika's voice rose. You want to talk about criminals? The real crime is a healthcare system that lets people die because they're poor. The real crime is insurance companies denying coverage for life-saving treatments. The real crime is that we live in one of the richest countries in the world, and medical bankruptcy is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy. She pointed at Tadahiro. This man lost 7 people he loved because they couldn't access medical care. 7. And instead of just accepting that as the way things are, he's trying to change it. He's here, competing in your game, following your rules, so he can use whatever power he wins to make sure no one else has to bury their little brother because the hospital was too far away. The crowd was silent now, listening. So yes, Yimika continued. He runs an organization that operates outside the law. But at least he's using that to help people who have no one else. What's your excuse? She looked directly at Ashford. What are you doing with your power, except trying to keep people like him out? Ashford's face had gone red. How dare you? She makes a fair point. Everyone turned. Finley had stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The wild card system exists precisely to allow outsiders into this competition, he said. People who don't have distinguished lineage or inherited wealth. People who have to fight for everything they achieve. He looked at Tadahiro. I don't like him. I don't respect his methods. But he won his spot fairly, and the rules are clear. If we start disqualifying people based on moral judgments, where does it end? Lord Harrington studied both men for a long moment. Then he turned to the council members. The objection is denied, he said. Mr. Kinjo stays in the competition. These proceedings are concluded. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others protesting. But Yimika barely heard it. She was staring at Finley, who'd just defended his rival. Tadahiro stepped close to her as the crowd dispersed. Thank you, he said quietly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Someone had to say it. Still. His eyes held hers. Thank you. Later, as Yimika was packing up the medical tent, Finley appeared in the entrance. That was quite a speech, he said. I meant every word. I know. That's what made it powerful. He paused. You're starting to care about him. It wasn't a question. Yimika didn't answer. Just be careful, Finley said. This competition, it changes people. Brings out the worst in them. I don't want to see you hurt. I can take care of myself. I know. But maybe, he stopped. Maybe, I want to take care of you anyway. Then he left, and Yimika was alone with the uncomfortable realization that she was falling for both of them, and there was no rule book that could tell her how to handle that. The underwater rescue challenge was designed to break people. Yimika understood this the moment she saw the setup. A 40-foot pool filled with murky water, obstacles submerged at various depths, and at the very bottom, weighted mannequins dressed in civilian clothes. The task was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Dive down. Retrieve the mannequin. Bring it to the surface. Fastest time wins. But there was a twist. The mannequins weighed 70 pounds each and were anchored with quick-release mechanisms that required fine motor control to operate. Underwater, while holding your breath, in near-zero visibility. This is insane, Yimika muttered. Someone's going to drown. That's why we're here, Dr. Chen said, checking the oxygen tanks they'd prepared for emergency intervention. 8 competitors remained after yesterday's elimination round, a grueling obstacle course that had claimed 2 more participants. Finley and Tadahiro had both placed in the top 3, but the gap between them was narrowing. Finley was winning on points. Tadahiro was winning hearts. The first competitor, Dove. He made it halfway down before his lungs gave out, and he had to surface, gasping and empty-handed. The second competitor managed to reach the mannequin, but couldn't operate the release mechanism. She surfaced after 90 seconds, face red, coughing water. Then it was Finley's turn. He stood at the pool's edge in a black wetsuit, breathing slowly, deliberately, oxygenating his blood. Yimika had seen him practice this. He'd trained with Navy diving instructors, could hold his breath for over 4 minutes in controlled conditions. The whistle blew. Finley Dove, his form perfect, cutting through the water like a blade. He reached the bottom in under 15 seconds, located his mannequin, the one with the red shirt, and began working the release mechanism. Yimika watched the timer. 30 seconds. 45. 60. The mechanism clicked. Finley grabbed the mannequin and kicked toward the surface, his powerful strokes propelling both upward. He broke the surface at 1 minute, 18 seconds, dragging the mannequin onto the deck with practiced efficiency. The crowd roared. It was the fastest time by 40 seconds. Finley climbed out, water streaming from his hair, and looked directly at Tadahiro. The message was clear. Beat that. 2 more competitors went. Both failed to even reach the bottom. Then it was Tadahiro's turn. He stood at the pool's edge, and Yimika noticed something wrong immediately. His breathing was too shallow, his shoulders too tight. The wounds from the horseback trial had never fully healed, and yesterday's obstacle course had reopened them. She'd bandaged him this morning, had told him not to push it. He was going to push it anyway. The whistle blew. Tadahiro dove, but his form was off. He wasn't cutting through the water. He was fighting it. Yimika's hands tightened on the rescue equipment. He's struggling, Dr. Chen said. Tadahiro reached the bottom, found his mannequin, the one with the blue shirt, and began working the release. But his movements were sluggish, imprecise. The mechanism wasn't cooperating. The timer hit 60 seconds. 70. 80. He needs to surface, Yimika said. He's still working on it. 90 seconds. The release finally clicked. Tadahiro grabbed the mannequin and pushed off the bottom, but his kick was weak. He was running out of air. 100 seconds. He was only halfway up, the mannequin dragging him down, his movements becoming erratic. He's not going to make it, Dr. Chen said. Yimika didn't think. She grabbed the spare oxygen tank, kicked off her shoes, and dove into the pool. The water was cold and dark. She could barely see Tadahiro's silhouette above her, sinking rather than rising, the mannequin still clutched in his arms. His eyes were closed. Bubbles escaped his lips. She reached him, jammed the oxygen regulator into his mouth, and pressed the purge valve. His eyes snapped open, disoriented, then focused on her. He took a breath, then another, then seemed to remember where he was. He let go of the mannequin. Yimika grabbed him and kicked toward the surface with everything she had. They broke through together, Tadahiro coughing and gasping, Yimika supporting his weight. Hands reached down to pull them out. Dr. Chun, a safety team. Finley, who'd appeared at the pool's edge, his face tight with something that might have been concern or might have been anger. They laid Tadahiro on the deck. He was conscious, breathing, but his lips were blue and his entire body was shaking. "What were you thinking?" Yimika demanded, checking his pulse. "You almost died down there." "Had to finish." Tadahiro gasped. "The mannequin is still at the bottom. You idiot. You didn't finish." "But I tried." "Trying doesn't mean anything if you're dead." She was yelling now, her hands shaking as she wrapped a thermal blanket around him. She wasn't sure if she was angry or terrified, or both. Lord Harrington appeared, his face grave. "Mr. Kinjo, you are disqualified from this trial for failure to complete the task and for requiring rescue intervention." Tadahiro nodded, still too oxygen-deprived to speak. However, the old man continued, "You are not eliminated from the competition. You simply receive 0 points for this event." The crowd murmured. It was a mercy ruling, and everyone knew it. But it was also technically correct. The rules said failure meant disqualification from the trial, not from the competition itself. "Miss Johnson," Lord Harrington said, turning to Yimika, "that was a remarkable act of courage. You potentially saved this man's life." "I was just doing my job," Yimika said. "Your job is to provide medical care, not to dive into 40 feet of water." The old man smiled slightly. "But I'm glad you did." As they loaded Tadahiro onto a stretcher to take him to the medical tent for observation, Finley appeared beside Yimika. "That was reckless," he said quietly. "Someone had to. It could have been you on that stretcher. It could have been both of you. But it wasn't." Finley looked at her, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. "You would have done the same for me," he said. "Wouldn't you?" It wasn't really a question. But Yimika answered anyway. "Yes." He nodded, like that confirmed something he'd been afraid to ask. Then he walked away, leaving Yimika standing by the pool in wet clothes, wondering when saving lives had become so complicated. The medical tent smelled like antiseptic and regret. Tadahiro lay on the examination table, vitals stable, color returning to his face. He was weak, but he was excited that Yimika was treating him. Yimika had spent the last hour monitoring him for secondary drowning symptoms, fluid in the lungs that could develop hours after a near drowning. So far, he was clear. "You should rest," she said, updating his chart. "I should train." He tried to sit up. She pushed him back down with one hand. "You almost died today. You're not training. You're not moving. You're lying here until I say otherwise." "I'm fine." "You're an idiot with a death wish." She set down the chart. "What is wrong with you? Why do you keep pushing yourself like this?" "Because if I don't win, then someone else will, and they'll do something good with the power, and the world will keep spinning." Her voice cracked. "Why does it have to be you?" Tadahiro was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because no one else is trying to save the people I'm trying to save. Finley's hospital is beautiful. It's necessary. But it's still in the city, where people have options. The rural communities, the mountain villages, the fishing towns, the places so remote they don't even have names on maps. They'll still have nothing. So let someone else fight that battle. There is no one else. He looked at her, and his eyes were tired. That's what you don't understand, Yimika. People like you, like Finley, you have options. You have systems that work for you, even if they're imperfect. But the people I come from, we have nothing but each other. And if I don't fight for them, no one will. Yimika felt something crack open in her chest. She'd been so focused on the competition, on the politics, on her own confusing feelings, that she'd forgotten what was actually at stake. I'm falling for you, she said. The words came out before she could stop them. And I hate it because you're killing yourself, and I can't watch someone I care about destroy themselves for a cause. Tadahiro stared at her. Yimika, I'm also falling for Finley, she continued, the confession spilling out like blood from a wound. Which makes even less sense because he's arrogant and entitled and everything I usually hate. But then he shows me blueprints for a hospital he's been planning for 3 years because he made a promise to his dying mother. And I see the person underneath the Duke. And she stopped. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Tadahiro sat up slowly, carefully, like he was afraid sudden movement might shatter the moment. You don't have to choose, he said quietly. Yes, I do. That's how this works. One of you wins. One of you loses. And I'm standing in the middle, tearing myself apart, because I care about both of you and both of your causes. And there's no world where everyone gets what they need. Then maybe we change the world. You can't just. Why not? Tadahiro swung his legs off the examination table, ignoring her protests. What if we stopped fighting each other? What if we found a different way? There is no different way. The decathlon has one winner. That's the rule. Rules can be rewritten. Before Yimika could respond, the tent flap opened. Finley stepped inside, still in his wetsuit, a towel draped around his shoulders. How is he? Finley asked. Alive, Yimika said. No thanks to his own common sense. Good. Finley turned to Tadahiro. That was stupid. What you did down there. You could have died. But I didn't. Because she saved you. Finley gestured to Yimika. She risked her life to pull you out of that pool. The least you could do is stop trying to throw yours away. Tadahiro's jaw tightened. I don't need lectures from. Yes, you do. We both do. Finley ran a hand through his wet hair. I've been thinking about what you said in the council hearing, about the real criminals being the systems that let people die. You were right. The tent went silent. What? Tadahiro said. You were right, Finley repeated. My hospital plan. It's good, but it's not enough. It serves the city. It serves people who already have some access. But the rural communities you're trying to reach, they'll never benefit from a centralized facility, no matter how well designed. So what are you saying? Finley met his eyes. I'm saying maybe we're both wrong. Maybe the answer isn't mobile units or a research hospital. Maybe it's both. A integrated system where the hospital serves as a hub and the mobile units extend its reach. Yimika's breath caught. That would require both of you to win. Or neither of us, Finley said. What if we both withdrew from the competition? Pooled our resources outside the decathlon structure? That's insane, Tadahiro said. We'd lose all the institutional support, the Harrington backing, everything. But we'd have each other. And we'd have her. Finley looked at Yimika. We'd have someone who actually understands what patients need, what the system is missing. We'd have the 3 perspectives necessary to build something that actually works. For a moment, the possibility hung in the air between them. A future where they weren't enemies, where the competition didn't matter, where they could build something together. Then Tadahiro shook his head. It won't work, he said. My organization. They're backing me because they think I'll win power they can leverage. If I withdraw, I lose their support. I lose everything. And my grandfather will never approve funding for a project I abandoned the decathlon for. Finley added, he'd see it as weakness. The possibility collapsed. Yimika felt it die between them, that brief, shining moment where things could have been different. So we keep fighting, she said quietly. We keep fighting, Finley agreed. Tadahiro nodded. May the best sovereign win. But as Finley left the tent and Tadahiro lay back down to rest, Yimika stood there thinking that maybe there was no such thing as the best sovereign. Maybe there were just good people trapped in bad systems, doing the best they could with the limited options they had. And maybe that was the real tragedy of the decathlon. If you have been enjoying this story so far, kindly subscribe and hit the notification bell to ensure this is the least you can do for us. You can also share this story to your groups and families. We'd appreciate that. Let's get back to the story. Day 7 dawned with the smell of burning rubber and gasoline. The racing trial was supposed to be straightforward. A 10-lap circuit around the estate's private track, modified sports cars, professional safety equipment. 6 competitors remained after yesterday's mental endurance challenge had broken 2 more participants. Finley, Tadahiro, and 4 others whose names Yimika had stopped bothering to remember because everyone knew this had become a 2-man race. She was stationed at the medical tent near turn 3, the sharpest corner on the track, where accidents were most likely to happen. Dr. Chen had taken turn 7. They had ambulances on standby, fire suppression equipment, the works. This is the most dangerous trial, Dr. Chen had told her during the morning briefing. Every year, someone crashes. 2 years ago, someone died. Then why do they still do it? Yimika had asked. Because danger is the point. Anyone can be brave when there's no risk. This tests who's willing to bet their life on their skill. Now, watching the competitors climb into their cars, Yimika understood what he meant. This wasn't about speed. It was about whether you could push yourself to the edge without falling over. Finley's car was a midnight blue Porsche 911, custom modified for track racing. Tadahiro had drawn a red Nissan GTR, which seemed almost poetic, the Korean gangster in a Japanese muscle car. The other competitors had various European machines, all gleaming and expensive. The starting flag dropped. 6 engines roared to life. The cars launched forward in a symphony of controlled violence, jockeying for position into the first turn. Finley took an early lead, his racing line perfect, his shifts smooth. Tadahiro sat in third, patient, waiting. First lap. Second lap. Third. On the 4th lap, going into turn 3, Tadahiro made his move. He dove inside on Finley's turn-in, an aggressive pass that forced Finley to either yield or crash. Finley yielded, but barely, and Yimika could see the fury in the way he attacked the next corner. 5th lap. They were wheel-to-wheel now, trading paint, neither willing to back down. 6th lap. That's when it happened. Finley's car, going into turn 7 at over 100 miles per hour, suddenly locked up. All 4 wheels seized simultaneously, turning the Porsche from a precision instrument into a missile. It shot off the track, through the grass, straight toward the concrete barrier. Yimika was already running before her conscious mind registered what she'd seen. She grabbed the medical bag, sprinted across the infield, arrived at turn 7 just as Dr. Chen reached the crash site. The Porsche had hit the barrier at an angle, crumpling the front end, but leaving the driver's cell intact. Finley was slumped over the wheel, unconscious, blood running down his face from a cut above his eyebrow. He's breathing, Dr. Chen said, checking his pulse. But we need to get him out. The fuel system could be compromised. The track marshals moved in with extraction equipment. Yimika climbed onto the wreckage, reached through the broken window and stabilized Finley's head and neck while they cut away the door. His eyes fluttered open. "Don't move," Yimika said. "You crashed. We're getting you out." "The brakes," he whispered. "They failed. All at once. That doesn't just happen." They extracted him carefully, laid him on the stretcher. Yimika did a rapid trauma assessment, while Dr. Chen called for the ambulance. Possible concussion, definitely needed stitches, but miraculously, nothing seemed broken. "I'm fine," Finley said, trying to sit up. "I can still." "You're done," Yimika said firmly. "You're going to the hospital for a CT scan, and then you're going to rest. The competition can wait." "The competition can't wait. If I forfeit this trial." "Then you forfeit it. You're alive. That's what matters." Finley grabbed her wrist, his grip weak but desperate. "Check the car. The brake lines. Please. Something's wrong." The ambulance arrived. They loaded him in, and Yimika watched it drive away, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline. Behind her, she heard raised voices. She turned to see Tadahiro and Lord Harrington standing near the wreckage, along with a team of mechanics and race officials. Brake lines were cut. One of the mechanics was saying, holding up a severed hydraulic line. "Clean cut, not a break. Someone sabotaged this car." The crowd that had gathered went silent. "That's impossible," Lord Harrington said. "The cars are kept in a secured garage. Only race officials have access." "Then one of your officials is dirty," Tadahiro said, flatly. "Because that didn't cut itself." Lord Harrington's face had gone gray. "This competition is suspended pending investigation. All competitors returned to the staging area immediately." As the crowd dispersed, Tadahiro caught Yimika's arm. "How is he?" he asked quietly. "He'll live. Probably a concussion. Needs stitches." She looked at him. "Did you have anything to do with this?" His expression hardened. "You think I would try to kill him? I think you want to win." "Not like this. Never like this." He released her arm. "I fight with honor, Yimika. I fight to win. But I don't cheat, and I don't sabotage. If Finley can't beat me on his own merit, then I don't deserve the victory." "It's disheartening to see you think so little of me," Tadahiro replied with disappointment. "I'm sorry," Yimika said, realizing her error in judgment. "It's fine, I understand." Tadahiro replied almost immediately. She believed him. And that scared her, because it meant someone else had done this. Someone who wanted both of them eliminated. The investigation took 3 days. 3 days during which Finley recovered in the hospital. Mild concussion, 12 stitches, bruised ribs, but nothing broken. 3 days during which security footage was reviewed, garage personnel were interviewed, and the entire estate was turned inside out looking for evidence. They found nothing. Whoever cut the brake lines had been careful, professional, and had left no trace. On the evening of the 3rd day, Lord Harrington announced that the competition would resume. The racing trial would be rerun with additional security measures. Finley was cleared to compete if he chose to. He chose to. Yimika was in the medical tent, preparing for the next day's trial, when Tadahiro appeared in the doorway. But he wasn't alone. The man with him was older, maybe 50, with iron-gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He wore an expensive suit and moved with the coiled grace of someone who'd spent his life being dangerous. "Yimika," Tadahiro said, his voice tight, "this is my brother, Park Jin-woo." Brother. But Tadahiro's brother was dead. The one in the photograph, the one with leukemia. Unless. Half-brother. Jin-woo corrected, his English accented, but perfect. Different mothers. "I'm the eldest. I run the Kinjo operations in Korea while Tadahiro plays games here." The contempt in his voice was palpable. "Jin-woo," Tadahiro said quietly. I told you I need more time. You've had 3 weeks. The chairmen are losing patience. Jinwoo turned to Yimika, studying her with eyes that missed nothing. So this is the nurse. The reason my brother has abandoned his responsibilities to participate in a children's game. It's not a game, Tadahiro said. No. Then what is it? A competition where rich men play at being warriors? Where the prize is the right to make one symbolic change that will be forgotten in a month. Jinwoo's voice rose. Our family is at war. The Sato clan is moving against our territories. We need you home. Now, I'm aware of the situation. Are you? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're so distracted by this woman and your foolish dreams of redemption that you've forgotten who you are. Tadahiro's hands clenched into fists. I know exactly who I am. Do you? Because the Tadahiro I know wouldn't waste time trying to save strangers when his own people are dying. Jinwoo pulled out his phone, swiped to a photo, and held it up. It showed a burned building, bodies covered in sheets. This happened 2 days ago. A Sato hit on one of our safe houses. 16 dead, including women and children. Tadahiro's face went pale. They're escalating because they know you're not there. Jinwoo continued mercilessly. They see weakness, and weakness gets people killed. He pocketed the phone. You have 2 choices. Come home now and lead your family, or stay here and watch everything our grandfather built burn to the ground. That's not fair, Yimika said, finding her voice. You can't put that on him. Jinwoo turned to her, and his expression was not unkind, just tired. Life isn't fair, Miss Johnson. And the men who try to save everyone end up saving no one. He looked back at Tadahiro. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. If you're not on that plane with me, the chairman will name me as the new head. You'll be removed from succession. Everything you've worked for, everything grandfather wanted for you, gone. Then do it, Tadahiro said quietly. Jinwoo's eyes widened slightly. What? Name yourself head. Take the title. I'm not coming back. Not yet. You'd throw away your birthright for this. For her. Not just for her. For what I'm trying to build here. For the promise I made to Kenji, to everyone we lost. Tadahiro's voice was steady now. You want to lead through violence and intimidation? Fine. That's always been your way. But I'm trying to build something different. Something better. And I'm not giving up on that. Jinwoo stared at his brother for a long moment. Then he shook his head. You're a fool, Tadahiro. A romantic fool who thinks the world can be changed with good intentions. He moved toward the 10 exit, then paused. But for what it's worth, grandfather would have been proud of you. He always said you had the kindest heart in the family. He worried it would get you killed. Then he was gone. Tadahiro stood frozen, his entire body trembling with tension. Yimika moved to him, placed a hand on his arm. Are you okay? She asked. No, he said honestly. I just gave up everything I was raised to be. Everything my family expected of me. And I'm not sure if that makes me brave or just stupid. It makes you human, Yimika said. It makes you someone who chose what they believed in over what they were told to be. Tadahiro looked at her, and she saw the vulnerability there, raw and exposed. What if I'm wrong? What if Jinwoo is right, and I'm just being selfish? Then you're selfish. But at least you're selfish in pursuit of something good. He laughed, but it was a broken sound. I've lost my family, Yimika. If I don't win this competition now, if I can't make the mobile medical units happen, then I've given up everything for nothing. Then we'll make sure you win. Yimika took a breath. She was about to cross a line, about to violate every principle of impartiality she'd maintained throughout this competition. But watching Tadahiro standing there, having just sacrificed everything for a dream of saving strangers he'd never meet. She couldn't stay neutral anymore. She confirmed. You're not alone in this. Tadahiro pulled her into a hug, sudden and fierce, and she could feel him shaking. She held him, this dangerous man who'd chosen kindness over power, and realized that she'd stopped falling for him days ago. She'd already fallen. Completely. Irreversibly. And somewhere in a hospital room across the estate, Finley Harrington was recovering from a suspicious car crash, preparing to fight for his own dream of redemption. The competition had 4 days left, and Yimika had just picked a side. Finley returned to the competition on day 8 with 12 stitches above his eyebrow and a determination that bordered on obsession. Yimika watched him climb out of the car that brought him from the hospital, moving carefully, his ribs still wrapped beneath his shirt. He should have been resting for another week. Instead, he was here, ready to compete in tomorrow's endurance trial. She met him at the competitor's pavilion, medical bag in hand. You shouldn't be here, she said. Neither should half the people still in this competition, yet here we are. Finley gestured to the pavilion, where Tadahiro stood with the 4 remaining competitors, studying maps of tomorrow's course. How is he? You almost died 3 days ago, and you're asking about your rival? I'm asking about the man who didn't sabotage my car. Finley's voice was quiet. The investigation cleared him. Completely. He was with Lord Harrington during the entire window when the tampering occurred. I know. Which means someone else wants both of us gone. Someone who benefits if we destroy each other or get disqualified. He paused. I've been thinking about what he said. About working together. Maybe he was right. Yimika's heart skipped. What are you saying? I'm saying. Finley stopped as a figure approached. Richard Ashford, the man who'd tried to have Tadahiro disqualified, walked toward them with his son Marcus trailing behind. Harrington, Ashford said, his voice dripping with false concern. Good to see you back on your feet. Terrible business, that accident. It wasn't an accident, Finley said flatly. No. Well, the investigation found no evidence of foul play, did it? Just unfortunate mechanical failure. Ashford smiled. These old cars, so unreliable. Something in his tone made Yimika's skin crawl. Finley must have felt it too, because his expression went cold. What do you want, Ashford? Just wanted to extend an offer. My son Marcus here. He's quite good at the endurance trials. Strong runner, excellent stamina. He could help you in tomorrow's event if you're not at full strength. Help me how? Form an alliance. Pool your points. Work together to eliminate the less desirable competitors. Ashford's eyes flicked toward Tadahiro. Then you two can compete for the final victory between gentlemen. As it should be. Finley studied the older man for a long moment. You cut my brake lines. Ashford's expression didn't change. That's a serious accusation. You wanted both Tadahiro and me injured or eliminated. Then your son could win by default. But it didn't work, did it? We're both still here. And now you're trying Plan B, turn us against each other so thoroughly that we disqualify ourselves. You have no proof of any of this. No, Finley agreed. But I don't need proof. I just need to make sure you don't win. He turned to Marcus Ashford. Your father is using you. He doesn't care if you're the best. He just wants the Ashford name attached to power. Marcus's face flushed. That's not. Isn't it? When was the last time he asked what you wanted? What you'd do with the victory if you won? The younger Ashford fell silent. Richard Ashford's mask of civility cracked. You're making a mistake, Harrington. The decathlon is about legacy, about maintaining the proper order. That criminal has no place here, and the fact that you're defending him shows how far you've fallen. The only thing falling is your plan. Finley stepped closer. Stay away from my car. Stay away from Tadahiro's car. And if anything else accidentally happens to any competitor, I will personally ensure that every media outlet in the country knows exactly what kind of man you are. Ashford's eyes narrowed. You're choosing him over your own kind. My own kind are people with honor. You don't qualify. Finley turned his back on them, dismissing them like servants. Now get out of my sight. The Ashfords left, father muttering threats, son looking confused and ashamed. Yimika stared at Finley. That was stupid, she said. You just made a powerful enemy. I already had a powerful enemy. Now I have clarity. Finley looked toward where Tadahiro stood. Come with me. There's something I need to do. He walked to the pavilion. Yimika followed, her heart pounding. The other competitors saw them coming and immediately made themselves scarce. This was between the two frontrunners. Kinjo, Finley said. Tadahiro turned, his expression wary. Duke, I need to speak with you. Privately. They moved to the edge of the pavilion, away from prying eyes and ears. Yimika stood between them, translator of a language they were still learning to speak. Finley took a breath. I'm withdrawing from the competition. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. What? Tadahiro said. You heard me. I'm withdrawing. You win by default. Why would you? Because Ashford tried to kill me, and he'll try again. Because this competition has become corrupted by people who care more about power than purpose. And because Finley's voice dropped. Because I realized something in that hospital bed. I don't need the decathlon to build my mother's hospital. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. This is a commitment letter from 3 private investors who've agreed to fund the project. Full funding. Construction can start immediately. I don't need my grandfather's approval. I don't need 30 days of ceremonial power. I just needed to stop being too proud to ask for help. Tadahiro stared at the document. So you're just giving up? I'm choosing a different path. There's a difference. Finley looked at Yimika. Someone recently reminded me that maybe we're both wrong. Maybe the answer isn't one winner and one loser. Maybe it's both of us succeeding in our own ways. But if you withdraw, Yimika said carefully, Tadahiro still has to win. The mobile medical units still need institutional backing. I know. That's why I'm not just withdrawing. Finley turned back to Tadahiro. I'm endorsing you. Publicly. The Harrington heir supporting a wild card competitor. It'll be a media sensation. My grandfather will hate it, which frankly makes it even better. Why? Tadahiro asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Why would you help me? Because you gave up your criminal empire to be here. Because you have 7 people tattooed on your body who deserve better than to have died for nothing. Because Finley's voice caught. Because she loves you. And I'd rather lose to someone worthy than win by destroying what she cares about. Yimika felt tears sting her eyes. Finley, don't. He held up a hand. Let me finish. I'm withdrawing from the competition, but I'm making you a promise. When you win, and you will win, I'll be there. My hospital and your mobile units will work together. Integrated care network. We'll build the system we talked about. Partners, not rivals. He extended his hand to Tadahiro. Deal. Tadahiro looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then he pushed it aside and pulled Finley into a brief, fierce embrace. You're an arrogant bastard, Tadahiro said, his voice rough with emotion. But you're a good man. So are you. Turns out we both are. Who knew? Finley stepped back, composing himself. Now go win this thing. I'll handle the media circus. He walked away, and Yimika watched him go, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. He'd given up everything he'd worked for. Not because he had to, but because it was right. Tadahiro touched her arm. Go to him, he said quietly. What? He just sacrificed his dream for mine. The least you can do is make sure he knows it mattered. Tadahiro smiled sadly. I'll still be here when you get back. Yumika ran. She caught up with Finley at the garden, the same garden where he'd shown her the hospital blueprints. He was sitting on the fountain's edge, head in his hands. That was the most selfless thing I've ever seen, she said. He looked up. Or, the most selfish. I couldn't beat him. Yumika. Not really. He's faster, stronger, more determined. I would have lost anyway. At least this way, I get to pretend I chose it. That's not true. Isn't it? He stood, walked to her. I spent my whole life winning. 2 years straight. I won this competition. I thought that made me worthy. But watching you save his life, watching him give up everything for a cause, I realized I was competing in the wrong arena. What arena are you competing in now? The one where I try to be the kind of man you could love, even if I know I've already lost that competition too. He cupped her face gently. But that's okay, because losing to him doesn't feel like losing. It feels like clarity. Yumika's tears spilled over. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just when you're with him, when you're building your life together, remember that I tried. Remember that I saw what mattered and chose it, even when it hurt. Then he kissed her forehead, gentle and final, and walked away. Yumika stood alone in the garden, crying for the man who'd loved her enough to let her go, and wondering if doing the right thing was always supposed to hurt this much. If you have been enjoying this story so far, kindly subscribe and hit the notification bell to ensure you're part of the inner circle for every new release. And if you think we are almost done with this crazy story, you are in for a twist. Grab your popcorns and let's ride. The maze was a nightmare made of hedges and mirrors. Built specifically for the competition, it sprawled across 5 acres of the estate's northern grounds. 10-foot-tall boxwood walls formed the corridors, and at strategic points, floor-to-ceiling mirrors had been installed to disorient competitors. The goal was simple. Navigate from the entrance to the center, where a flag waited. First person to reach the center and return with the flag won the trial. But there was a twist. The maze rearranged itself. Sections of the hedge walls were mounted on hidden tracks, controlled by a computer program that shifted the layout every 15 minutes. What was a dead end could become a corridor. What was a corridor could trap you in a box. For competitors, remained after Finley's withdrawal had shocked the entire competition. Tadahiro, Marcus Ashford, and 2 others, a woman named Victoria Chesterfield who'd stayed quiet and competent throughout, and a man named James Rothschild who'd survived more by luck than skill. They stood at the maze entrance at dawn, the air cold and damp, mist still clinging to the ground. You will enter at 15-minute intervals, Lord Harrington announced from his platform. Mr. Kinjo, as the current points leader, you enter first. The walls will shift on a random pattern. There are emergency exits marked with red lights for anyone who cannot continue. This trial tests not just navigation, but mental resilience. Tadahiro stepped to the entrance. He wore black running clothes, his chest finally healed enough that the bandages were gone. His tattoos were visible, dark ink against skin, a walking memorial to everyone he'd lost. The starting horn sounded. He vanished into the maze. 15 minutes later, Marcus Ashford entered. Then Victoria. Then James. Yumika stood in the medical tent near the maze's center, monitoring radio communications. Dr. Chun had other tents positioned at the cardinal points. If anyone triggered an emergency exit, they'd respond. The first hour passed in silence. Then the radio crackled. Medical to center. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Dr. Chen's voice came through. Two competitors encountered each other at Junction 7. They are not leaving. Yimika grabbed the medical bag and ran. She navigated using the service paths, hidden corridors that let staff move through the maze without getting lost, and emerged at Junction 7. What she found made her stop dead. Tadahiro and Marcus Ashford stood face to face in a small clearing formed by 4 hedge walls. But they weren't fighting. They were talking. Didn't know what he was planning. Marcus was saying, his voice tight with emotion. I swear, I thought we were just here to compete. I didn't know about the car, about any of it. I believe you, Tadahiro said calmly. But that doesn't change what your father did. I know. And I'm sorry. For all of it. Marcus looked young suddenly, despite being 30. He's always been like this. Always trying to buy or intimidate his way to power. I thought if I won this competition, maybe he'd finally see me as more than just a tool. He won't. Men like him don't change. Then what do I do? Stop competing for his approval. Start competing for yours. Marcus stared at him. That's easy for you to say. You gave up your family for your principles. I don't have that kind of courage. Yes, you do. You're here, aren't you? You could have left after your father was exposed. But you stayed. Tadahiro smiled slightly. That's courage. Yimika cleared her throat. Both men turned to look at her. Am I interrupting? She asked. No, Tadahiro said. We were just forming an alliance. An alliance? Marcus is going to help me find the center of the maze. In exchange, I'm going to help him figure out who he wants to be when this is over. Tadahiro extended his hand. Marcus shook it. You're helping your competitor? Yimika said. I'm helping someone who needs it. There's a difference. They moved through the maze together, Tadahiro's instincts and Marcus's memory combining to navigate the shifting walls. Yimika followed through the service paths, watching this unlikely partnership form. At one point, they encountered Victoria, who'd injured her ankle in a fall. Without hesitation, Tadahiro and Marcus helped her to an emergency exit, even though it cost them time. At another point, a wall shifted and trapped Marcus in a dead end. Tadahiro climbed the hedge, against the rules, probably, but no one was watching, and pulled him out. 3 hours into the trial, they reached the center. The flag stood on a pedestal, red silk gleaming in the afternoon sun. James Rothschild was already there, sitting with his back against the pedestal, looking exhausted. I can't find the way out, he said. I've been here for an hour. Every path I take just leads me in circles. Tadahiro looked at the maze layout, at the paths leading away from the center. Then he smiled. That's because you're thinking like the maze wants you to think. You're following paths. But what if we made our own path? What do you mean? Tadahiro turned to Marcus and James. Help me push this wall. They stared at him. You can't just. Why not? The rules say we have to reach the center and return with the flag. They don't say we have to use the existing paths. It took all 3 of them, but they managed to push one of the hedge wall sections off its track. It toppled over with a crash, creating a straight line from the center to the exit. Alarms started blaring. Race officials came running. Lord Harrington appeared, looking both furious and impressed. Mr. Kinjo, he said, you've destroyed competition property. I've also won the trial. Tadahiro held up the flag. I reached the center and returned with the flag, as required. You never said I had to use the maze as designed. For a long moment, Lord Harrington stared at him. Then the old man laughed. You're absolutely right. Congratulations, Mr. Kinjo. You win by creative interpretation of the rules. The crowd that had gathered erupted in cheers. Marcus and James were helping Victoria to the medical tent. Tadahiro stood in the wreckage of the maze he'd literally broken through, and Yimika realized something. He hadn't just won a trial. He'd shown everyone watching that when the system doesn't work, you change the system. You don't accept the walls you're given. You push them down and build something better. That night, as Yimika was closing the medical tent, Tadahiro appeared. 2 days left, he said. The discovery trial tomorrow, then the final duel. Are you ready? No, but I'll do it anyway. He stepped closer. Yimika, when this is over. Don't. She put a finger to his lips. Don't make promises about after. Just focus on winning. We'll figure out the rest later. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the moment before it disappeared. And she kissed him back, knowing that in 2 days, everything would change. For better or worse, the decathlon was almost over. And the hardest trials were still ahead. Day 9 began, with Yimika searching for gauze in the storage room beneath the main hospital building. The final competitors, Tadahiro, Victoria Chesterfield, and Marcus Ashford, would face the penultimate trial in a few hours, a test of knowledge and problem-solving that Lord Harrington had designed personally. Medical supplies were being moved to the trial location, and Yimika needed to inventory everything before transport. The storage room was old, part of the original Harrington Hospital built 60 years ago. Concrete floors, metal shelving units, and that particular smell of disinfectant and age that clung to every basement medical facility. She was counting 4 bags when she noticed the box. It sat on the highest shelf, covered in dust, labeled in faded marker. New Harrington Archive, 1995. The year didn't mean anything to her at first. She almost ignored it. But something made her pull it down, made her open it. Inside were old competition records, photographs, documents. She flipped through them idly, contestants she didn't recognize, trial results from before she was born. Then she found the medical bag. It was leather, cracked with age, the initials AJ embossed on the flap. Inside were outdated instruments, old medication bottles, and tucked into a side pocket, a photograph. Yimika's hands started shaking. The photograph showed a young man in his early 20s standing in front of New Harrington Hospital, wearing scrubs, and holding that same leather medical bag. He was smiling, his arm around a woman who looked radiant despite the exhaustion in her eyes. Between them, barely visible, was a rounded belly. The woman was pregnant. Yimika flipped the photo over. Written on the back in careful handwriting, Yinka and Adewale Johnson. First day as attending physician. March 1996. Her parents. But that was impossible. Her father had been a traveling doctor who died when she was 3. Her mother had always said he'd worked in rural clinics, that he'd never been associated with the Harrington family. Yimika dug deeper into the box. Found more photographs. Found a competition certificate dated December 1995, declaring the winner of that year's decathlon, Dr. Adewale Johnson. Her father had won the decathlon. Her father had been the wild card competitor who'd beaten 18 nobles and won the right to propose a policy change. And according to the documents, he'd used that victory to establish rural medical outreach programs, the precursor to exactly what Tadahiro was fighting for now. There was more. Letters from Lord Harrington to her father. Official correspondence that grew increasingly hostile. Her father had refused to leverage his victory for personal gain. Had refused to join the Harrington inner circle, to marry into their legacy, to become part of their power structure. Instead, he'd taken his victory and disappeared into the very rural communities he'd fought to serve. The Harringtons had erased him from their official records, scrubbed his name from the winners list, pretended he'd never existed, and they'd been watching his daughter ever since. The invitation to work at New Harrington Hospital. The scholarship that had brought her from Nigeria to Johns Hopkins. The job offer she thought was merit-based. None of it had been coincidence. They'd been tracking her, waiting for her to show the same stubborn idealism as her father. The wild card lottery that Tadahiro won wasn't random. They'd been testing both of them, the gangster with a heart and the doctor's daughter with her father's fire, seeing if they'd make the same choices, seeing if they'd be easier to control than Adewale Johnson had been. You weren't supposed to find that. Yimika spun around. Lord Harrington stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked ancient suddenly, and tired. My father won, Yimika said, her voice shaking with anger. He won, and you erased him. We honored his victory. Every promise we made, we kept. The rural programs were established. The funding was allocated. Lord Harrington stepped into the room. But your father rejected everything else. He refused the title, refused the power, refused to play the game the way it's meant to be played. Because he understood something you never did. Power isn't the point. Helping people is. And where did that idealism get him? The old man's voice was sharp. Dead at 30, treating patients in a village without proper equipment, without backup, without resources. He could have changed the entire system from the inside. Instead, he saved a few hundred people, and then died, leaving a widow and a 3-year-old daughter with nothing. Yimika felt tears burning her eyes. He died doing what he believed in. He died because he was too proud to accept help. Lord Harrington moved closer. You're making the same mistake, girl. You and that Korean boy, you think you can change the world through sacrifice and noble intentions. But the world doesn't change that way. It changes through power, through institutions, through people who are willing to compromise. Is that why you've been manipulating this whole competition? Why you put Tadahiro and me here? To prove your point. I put you here to give you a choice your father never understood he had. Win the decathlon. Take the power. Use it intelligently instead of throwing it away on grand gestures. His eyes were hard. You're the rightful heir, Yimika, the daughter of a champion. You could enter the final trial. You could challenge for the title. I'm a medic, not a competitor. You're a Johnson, and Johnsons have always been fighters, even when they claimed otherwise. He gestured to the documents. Your father's victory came with a clause. Any direct descendant has the right to invoke champion succession, to enter the competition at any point and compete for the title. That's insane. That's tradition. And tradition is the only thing that's kept this competition meaningful for 200 years. Lord Harrington's expression softened slightly. I liked your father, despite everything. He was brilliant and stubborn and impossibly idealistic. When I see you standing there, I see him. And I'm giving you the choice he never gave himself. Take the power, or watch someone else wield it. Tadahiro is going to win, Yimika said, and he's going to use that victory to help people. Is he, or is he going to discover that 30 days of ceremonial power isn't enough to change anything? That the mobile medical units he dreams of require ongoing funding, political support, institutional backing, all the things he doesn't have and can't get without becoming part of the system he despises. The words hit like a punch. Because Lord Harrington was right. Winning the decathlon wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much longer, harder fight. Think about it, the old man said. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Enter the final trial as your father's heir, or watch from the sidelines while history repeats itself. He left her alone in the storage room, surrounded by her father's legacy and the terrible weight of choice. Yimika sat down on the concrete floor, clutching her father's medical bag, and cried for the man she'd never really known, and the impossible decision he'd left her with. Night fell over Harrington Estate like a curtain dropping on the final act. Yimika sat in the medical tent, staring at her father's medical bag. She hadn't told anyone about the discovery. Hadn't told Tadahiro about the champion's succession clause. She kept thinking about what Lord Harrington had said. Watch from the sidelines while history repeats itself. Her father had won and walked away. And he died young, having changed very little in the grand scheme of things. The rural programs he'd established had been defunded within 5 years. The policies he'd fought for had been quietly reversed. His victory had meant something for a moment, then been swallowed by the system. Would Tadahiro's victory be any different? The tent flap opened. Tadahiro stepped inside, and Yimika quickly wiped her eyes. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" "No. But I will be." She set down the medical bag. "Shouldn't you be resting? The final trial is tomorrow." Couldn't sleep. He sat beside her on the examination table. "Keep thinking about what comes after. If I win, I get 30 days to establish the mobile units. But 30 days isn't enough to build the infrastructure, train the staff, secure ongoing funding. I'll start something I can't finish." "So you finish it after the 30 days. With what resources?" "I gave up my organization. I have no money, no power, no institutional backing." He laughed bitterly. "I'm starting to think Finley was smarter than both of us. He found private investors. He's building something real while I'm chasing a symbolic victory." Yimika took his hand. "You're not chasing a symbol. You're chasing a promise. That's different." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I gave up everything for a title that means nothing." She wanted to tell him about her father, about the champion's succession clause, about the choice Lord Harrington had laid at her feet. But the words stuck in her throat. If she entered the competition, she'd be competing against Tadahiro, fighting the man she loved for a victory he'd sacrificed everything to achieve. But if she didn't enter, she'd be abandoning the legacy her father died protecting. "Tadahiro," she said carefully, "what if there was another way? What if?" A knock on the tent post interrupted her. Finley stood in the entrance, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I need to talk to both of you." Tadahiro tensed. "If this is about the competition, it's about what comes after the competition." Finley stepped inside, carrying a leather portfolio. "I've been doing research, looking into past decathlon winners, what they accomplished, how their victories played out. And I found something interesting." He opened the portfolio, spread documents across the examination table. "Every winner who tried to work outside the establishment failed," Finley said. "Their policy changes were reversed, their initiatives defunded, their victories forgotten within a decade. But the winners who leveraged their victory to build institutional partnerships, who used the 30 days to forge alliances rather than implement solutions, they actually created lasting change." "What are you saying?" Yimika asked. "I'm saying Tadahiro can't do this alone. Neither could I. But together, with proper institutional backing, we could build something that lasts." Finley pulled out a contract. "This is a partnership agreement. If Tadahiro wins tomorrow, my investors will provide seed funding for the mobile medical units. The Harrington Foundation will offer logistical support. And I'll personally oversee the integration between the mobile units and my hospital project." Tadahiro stared at the document. "Why would you do this?" "Because you were right. The system is broken. But burning it down and rebuilding from scratch takes generations. Working within it to change it from the inside, that's faster. Not as satisfying, maybe, but more effective. This is everything I walked away from. Institutional backing, corporate partnerships, becoming part of the system." "No," Finley said. "This is using the system as a tool, rather than being used by it. There's a difference. He looked at Yimika. Someone very smart taught me that good people shouldn't have to destroy themselves to do good things. Maybe the same applies to systems. Yimika felt something crack open in her chest. This was it. This was the answer she'd been searching for. Not symbolic victories or lone heroes sacrificing themselves on the altar of principle, but people working together, leveraging their combined resources to create something sustainable. Her father hadn't failed because he lacked conviction. He'd failed because he tried to do it alone. "I'm in," she said. Both men looked at her. "I'm entering the final trial," Yimika continued, her voice steady now. "As my father's heir. Champion's succession. It's my right under the competition rules." "What?" Tadahiro stood up. "Yimika, no. You can't. My father was Adewale Johnson. He won the decathlon in 1995. The Harringtons erased his victory from the records, but it still counts. I'm his daughter. I have the right to compete." Finley was staring at her, something like understanding dawning in his eyes. "That's why you were invited here. Why they've been watching you. You're the heir. And I'm done watching from the sidelines while men fight over who gets to save the world." Yimika looked at Tadahiro. "I love you, but I'm not going to let you destroy yourself for a cause when there's another way. If I enter the competition, if I win, I'll have the institutional legitimacy you lack. The Harringtons can't erase me the way they erased my father. And with Finley's support, we can build something that actually lasts." "You're going to fight me," Tadahiro said quietly. "I'm going to save you. From yourself, from this impossible standard you've set, from the belief that you have to sacrifice everything to matter." She took his face in her hands. "You already matter. Now, let me help you make it count." Tadahiro pulled her into a kiss, desperate and fierce. When they broke apart, his eyes were wet. "You're insane," he said. "I learned from the best." Finley cleared his throat. "So tomorrow, the final trial will be between the two people I care about most in the world fighting for a cause I believe in. This is either the best outcome or the worst, and I honestly can't tell which." "It's both," Yimika said. "But that's okay. The best things usually are." They sat together in the medical tent, three people who'd started as rivals and enemies, now bound together by something stronger than competition. Tomorrow, Yimika and Tadahiro would fight. One would win. One would lose. But for the first time since this all began, Yimika felt like maybe they could all win in the ways that actually mattered. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. The storm was coming. And with it, the final trial. If you have been enjoying this story so far, kindly subscribe and hit the notification bell to ensure you get notified for every new release. Let's get back to this wonderful piece. The arena had been transformed overnight into something ancient and terrible. Gone were the modern safety measures, the comfortable seating, the sterile efficiency of previous trials. In their place stood a circular combat pit, ringed by torches. The ground covered in sand that had been raked into patterns like a Zen garden preparing for blood. Wooden stands surrounded the pit, packed with spectators who'd come from across the country to witness the final trial. The Trial of Blades. The oldest tradition of the decathlon, unchanged for 200 years. Yimika stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena, wrapping her hands in cloth strips. She trained all night with Finley, who'd called in his fencing instructor to teach her the basics of sword combat. 8 hours of learning footwork, guard positions, attack angles. It wasn't enough. Not even close. Across the chamber, Tadahiro sat in meditation, his eyes closed, his breathing slow and controlled. He'd been trained in kenjutsu since childhood. The sword was as natural to him as breathing. This was going to be a massacre, and everyone knew it. "You don't have to do this," Finley said quietly, standing beside her. "You've made your point. You've entered the competition, invoked your father's legacy. You can withdraw now with honor. That's not how this works, Yimika said, testing the weight of the practice sword she'd been given. It was blunted steel, designed not to kill but capable of breaking bones, if wielded with enough force. If I withdraw, Tadahiro wins by default. But the Harringtons will never respect a victory given rather than earned. We need this to be real. Real could mean you get seriously hurt. Then you'll be there to patch me up afterward. Dr. Chin appeared in the doorway. They're ready for you. Yimika took a deep breath. Across the chamber, Tadahiro opened his eyes. They stared at each other across 30 feet of stone floor. And in that moment, all the words between them became unnecessary. This was love expressed as combat. Trust expressed as the willingness to hurt each other in pursuit of something greater. It was insane and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. They walked into the arena together, emerging from opposite sides of the pit. The crowd roared. Yimika's heart hammered against her ribs, so hard she thought it might break through. Lord Harrington stood in the ceremonial box, looking every inch the ancient king presiding over trial by combat. His voice carried across the arena through speakers hidden in the torch posts. The final trial, he announced. Single combat between the two remaining competitors. First to yield, or first to be rendered unable to continue loses. The victor becomes the sovereign of the eastern counties for 30 days and earns the right to propose one change to county law or policy. He paused, his eyes finding Yimika. This is also the first time in decathlon history that a champion's heir has invoked succession rights. Miss Johnson carries not just her own claim, but her father's legacy. Mr. Kinjo carries the hopes of those forgotten by the system. May the most worthy sovereign prevail. The ceremonial drum began to beat. Slow at first, then faster, building to a crescendo. On the final beat, both competitors drew their swords and stepped into guard positions. The arena went silent. Then Tadahiro attacked. He came in fast, testing her defense with a series of strikes that Yimika barely managed to parry. The impact of steel on steel sent shockwaves up her arms. He was holding back. She could tell, but even his restraint was overwhelming. She tried to counterattack. A clumsy thrust that he sidestepped easily. His return strike caught her on the shoulder, not hard enough to injure, but enough to make the point. First blood, metaphorically speaking. The crowd gasped. Fight me, Tadahiro said quietly, circling her. Really fight me, Yimika. Don't hold back. I'm trying. He struck again, faster this time, his blade coming in from 3 angles in rapid succession. Yimika blocked the first 2, but the third caught her sword arm. Pain exploded through her wrist. The practice sword flew from her hand, landing in the sand 10 feet away. The drum stopped. The match was over. Tadahiro had won in less than 2 minutes. But as Yimika dropped to her knees, clutching her injured wrist, something strange happened. The sky, which had been gray with approaching storm clouds all morning, suddenly opened up. Rain poured down in sheets, drenching the arena in seconds. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it drowned out the crowd's confusion. And then the arena began to collapse. Not metaphorically, literally. The wooden support beams that held up the northern section of the stands gave way, with a groan of tortured wood. People screamed as the structure tilted, threatening to spill hundreds of spectators into the combat pit below. Yimika looked up through the rain and saw where the collapse was headed, directly toward a section packed with children, a school group that had been given special permission to attend. She ran, not away from the danger, toward it, her injured wrist forgotten, her defeat irrelevant, every instinct screaming at her to save them. Tadahiro was already moving. He dropped his sword and was sprinting to the same spot, arriving just as the first support beam came down. He caught it, his entire body straining against the weight of collapsing architecture. Yimika grabbed another beam, feeling something in her shoulder tear as she took the weight. The pain was excruciating. She screamed through it, holding on. "Get them out!" Tadahiro roared to the nearby security team. "Get the children out now." Finley appeared, climbing over the arena wall with a group of staff members. They began evacuating the threatened section, moving people as fast as they could while Yimika and Tadahiro held up thousands of pounds of collapsing structure. "I can't hold it much longer," Yimika gasped. "Yes, you can," Tadahiro said through gritted teeth. "Just a little longer." But the rain had made everything slippery. Yimika's grip was failing. The beam was sliding through her hands, splinters driving into her palms. Her vision was starting to go dark at the edges from the strain. The last child was carried out just as Yimika's grip gave way entirely. She fell backward as the structure came down. Tadahiro caught her, throwing them both clear of the collapse. They hit the sand together, a tangle of limbs and pain, as the northern section of the arena crashed down where they'd been standing seconds before. Silence. Then chaos. People were shouting, crying, calling for medical assistance. Yimika tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Everything hurt. Her wrist was definitely broken. Her shoulder might be dislocated. She tasted blood. "Are you okay?" Tadahiro asked, his face inches from hers, rain streaming down his cheeks. "No. No." He laughed, a pained, desperate sound. "But we saved them." "We did." Finley appeared above them, his face pale with shock. "That wasn't an accident. The support beams, someone cut through them. Deliberately. Like the car brakes." Lord Harrington was there too, being helped down from his box by security. His expression was murderous. "Ashford," he said. "It had to be Ashford. He's been sabotaging the competition from the beginning." "Where is he?" Finley demanded. "Gone. He fled as soon as the collapse started." The old man looked at Yimika and Tadahiro, still lying in the sand, both injured but alive. "The trial is suspended. Both competitors require medical attention. We'll reconvene when—" "No." Yimika pushed herself to her feet, swaying but standing. Every part of her screamed in protest, but she stood anyway. "No suspension. We finish this now. Miss Johnson, you're injured." "So is he." She pointed to Tadahiro, who was climbing to his feet, his left arm hanging at an odd angle. "Dislocated shoulder. We both are. So we're even. Restart the trial." The crowd, which had been evacuating, stopped, turned, watched. "This is insane," Dr. Chen said from the medical area. "Both of you need immediate treatment." "After," Yimika said. "First, we finish what we started." She retrieved her practice sword from where it had fallen. Her broken wrist made holding it agony, but she gripped it anyway, switching to her left hand. Tadahiro picked up his sword with his good arm. They faced each other across the sand, both broken, both bleeding, both refusing to quit. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met," Tadahiro said. "You're the most reckless man I've ever loved," Yimika replied. Lord Harrington looked between them, seemed to make a decision, and signaled to the drummer. The beat began again. The rain poured down, and two people who loved each other prepared to finish the fight that would determine not just who won, but what winning even meant. They circled each other in the rain-soaked sand, two wounded fighters refusing to acknowledge that they'd already given everything. Yimika's left-handed grip on the practice sword was clumsy, unpracticed. Her broken right wrist throbbed with every heartbeat. Tadahiro's dislocated shoulder had limited his range of motion to half of what it should be. They were both operating on adrenaline and sheer willpower. The crowd pressed closer, forgetting about the collapsed section, forgetting about the evacuation. This was something primal, something true. Not a game anymore. Not a competition. Just two people fighting for what they believed in, with everything they had left. Tadahiro struck first, a careful probe that Yumika deflected awkwardly. She countered with a wild swing that he sidestepped easily. They were dancing now, not fighting, learning each other's limitations, finding the boundaries of what was possible when everything hurt. You should yield, Tadahiro said softly. You've proven your point. So have you. Yield first. Not happening. Then we're at an impasse. They came together again, swords meeting with a clash that sent pain shooting through both their injured arms. Locked together, faces inches apart, rain streaming between them. I don't want to hurt you, Tadahiro said. Then don't. Just beat me. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Yumika pushed him back, created distance. Hurting me would be letting me watch you destroy yourself for a cause you can't sustain alone. Beating me means accepting that you don't have to be alone anymore. She attacked. A flurry of strikes that had no technique behind them, just desperation and love expressed as violence. Tadahiro blocked them all, but barely. His sword worked defensive, protective. Fight back. Yumika screamed. Stop protecting me, and fight. I can't. You have to. If you won't fight me, you don't deserve to win. You're just running away in a different direction. That got through. Tadahiro's expression hardened. He stopped defending and started attacking, his strikes controlled but powerful. One caught Yumika's blade and sent it spinning from her injured grip. She stood there, disarmed, defenseless, rain pouring down her face. Tadahiro's sword stopped an inch from her throat. The crowd held its breath. Yield, he said quietly. No, Yumika. I won't yield. I won't quit. You're going to have to actually strike me, actually hurt me if you want to win. Because I'm not giving you the easy way out. Tadahiro's hand trembled. The sword wavered. This isn't fair. Nothing about this is fair. That's the point. Yumika stepped forward, pressing her throat against the practice blade. My father died, trying to do this alone. I'm not letting you make the same mistake. So either strike me down and carry that weight, or accept that winning doesn't mean I have to lose. For a long moment, they stood frozen. The entire arena was silent except for the drumming rain and distant thunder. Then Tadahiro lowered his sword. I yield, he said. The crowd erupted, but Tadahiro ignored them. Ignored Lord Harrington's proclamation. Ignored everything except Yumika. I yield because you're right, he said. Because I've been so focused on winning that I forgot why I was fighting. Because the strongest thing I can do right now is admit that I need help. Yumika felt tears mixing with the rain on her face. That's not how the trial works. You can't just. I can and I did. You win. He smiled, sad and beautiful. Congratulations, Sovereign. Lord Harrington descended into the arena, moving faster than Yumika had ever seen the old man move. This is highly irregular, he said. The trial rules. The trial rules state that the first to yield loses, Tadahiro interrupted. I yielded. She won. It's over. But you had her disarmed. You had victory. No, I had a choice between victory and wisdom. I chose wisdom. Tadahiro looked at Yumika. She'll do more good with the title than I ever could. Because she understands what I'm only just learning. That power is worthless if it isolates you from the people you're trying to help. Lord Harrington opened his mouth, closed it, then turned to Yumika. It seems you've won by default. Do you accept the title of sovereign? Yumika looked at Tadahiro. At Finley, standing at the edge of the arena with an expression of pride and pain and relief. At the crowd, waiting to see what she'd do with the victory she'd never expected to achieve. "I accept," she said, "on one condition. Conditions are not part of the tradition." Then it's time tradition changed. Yimika's voice carried across the arena, amplified by acoustics and conviction. "I accept the title, and I'll use my 30 days to establish the policy change. But I'm not doing it alone. Tadahiro's mobile medical units, Finley's research hospital, and whatever institutional support the Harrington family can provide, we combine them. Integrated healthcare network serving both urban and rural communities. All of it or none of it. That's 3 policy changes. No, it's 1. The change is this. We stop thinking of healthcare as a zero-sum game where someone has to lose for someone else to win. We build something that serves everyone, or we've failed everyone." She turned to the crowd. "My father won this competition 30 years ago. He had a vision of rural healthcare access that this family erased from the records because he wouldn't compromise. Well, I'm his daughter. I have his vision and his stubbornness. But I also have something he didn't, partners who won't let me do this alone." The crowd was listening now, really listening. "So here's my proposal," Yimika continued. "The Harrington Foundation provides land and funding. Finley's investors provide capital and oversight. Tadahiro's experience with underserved communities guides the implementation. And she looked at Lord Harrington. "I spend my 30 days not implementing the solution, but forging the partnerships that will sustain it after I'm gone. We build something that lasts beyond one person's victory." Lord Harrington stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. "Your father would be proud," he said quietly, "and furious. You've just used the decathlon to completely reshape how the decathlon operates. That takes a special kind of audacity. I learned from the best," Yimika said, "both of them." She looked at Tadahiro and Finley, her rivals, her partners, her. She never finished the thought, because that's when the woman appeared. She stepped out of the crowd, moving with purpose, and the rain seemed to part around her like she was walking through a different world. She was tall, dark-skinned, her features so similar to Yimika's that several people in the crowd gasped. She had the same bone structure, the same eyes, the same way of holding herself like she was ready to fight or save someone at a moment's notice. Yimika's breath stopped. The woman walked across the sand, stopped 3 feet away, and when she spoke, her voice carried the same Nigerian accent that Yimika had worked years to soften. "Hello, twin sister," the woman said. "I'm Yinka, and we need to talk about what our father really died for." The arena went silent. Yimika stared at this impossible woman, this mirror image, this sister she'd never known existed. What? She tried to speak, couldn't find the words. How? If you have enjoyed this story, let us know in the comment section. As we step into this brand new year of 2026, I want to take a moment to speak a blessing over you, our wonderful viewers. May this year bring you the strength of Yimika to stand your ground against any obstacle. May you find a loyalty as fierce as Tadahiro's and the courage to change for the better, just like Finley. We pray that your paths be made straight, your hearts be filled with peace, and your homes be overflowing with the kind of love that transcends every border and battle. May 2026 be your year of breakthrough, health, and divine favor. I really love our community, and I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me what your current situation is. Are you at work secretly binge-watching, lying in bed when you should be sleeping, or maybe escaping reality on your commute? Where in the world are you listening from? Are you in the US, UK, Trinidad, Jamaica, Nigeria, India, Barbados, Kenya, or South Africa? Tell me your city. I want to see how far the sovereign family reaches today. Happy New Year! Subscribe today, and let's make this story legendary together.